All right, welcome into CrossFire as we get you ready for the 2022 NFL season. Chris Hayre here with you, joined as always by the Athletics' Dane Brugler, who's going to debate some of the biggest names in football. And what an honor to have the great Greg Cosell, NFL Films, with us today, Dane. The topic today, guys, AFC West. I have 3 questions. And Greg, why don't you kick this one off for us? Most intriguing offseason acquisition, non-Charger in the division.
The most intriguing, obviously, is Russell Wilson. So I'm very curious to see how Denver is going to play offense. Obviously, they have a new head coach who's also essentially going to be their coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett. And they re-signed Melvin Gordon, so they've got 2 quality running backs. And one in Davante Williams, who I think is a really special back in terms of talent, with the ability to be a high-level sustaining runner in this league. So I'm really curious what their offense is going to look like, because my guess is you don't trade for Russell Wilson because he wants to be the man. So, I don't know how Dane feels, but I'm really curious to see what their offense is going to look like.
Dane, how do you feel?
Yeah, I think Wilson would have been my answer as well. That's as intriguing as it gets. But, I also want to talk about the Raiders and the 2 key additions they made with a top 3 receiver in the league in Davante Adams, and then Josh McDaniels, who, after years of being picky about that next move, he returns to the AFC West as the head coach of the Raiders. You've got Adams in the fold, reunited with his old college quarterback, Derek Carr. And you look at that Raiders offense, maybe one of the best pass-catching trios in the league, with Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller. And with McDaniels, he hasn't been a head coach in over a decade now. And the first time around wasn't great. So what did he learn over the last 10 years? How did he mature? Why was this the right move for him? So finding out the answers to those questions, I think, is what makes McDaniels' hire so intriguing.
And Chris, if I could just add one thing, and now that Dane brought up the Raiders, I think the other element for me with the Raiders is we know about Matt Crosby, but they signed Chandler Jones. And Chandler Jones, to me, has been one of the most overlooked, outstanding pass rushers in this league for years. And we know about the importance of pass rush in a passing league. And now you have 2 guys in Crosby and Jones who you could argue they're both top 5 edge pass rushers in the league, and they're on one team.
Greg, I'd be remiss, we have you here, if I didn't ask you, the most intriguing offseason addition for the Chargers. Obviously, a lot of big moves. I think J.C. Jackson, KHALIL Mack may be the headliners.
Well, I think to me, J.C. Jackson is the big move. He was the guy I was going to mention, because I'm very curious now to see how Brandon Staley, who's obviously super smart, is going to play in his secondary. Because last year, what they did with their corners is they played boundary and field. Mike Davis was the starter, and he was the boundary corner. Now, it would strike me, and again, Brandon Staley's a lot smarter than I am, but it would strike me that if you sign J.C. Jackson, you're not going to put him in that kind of box. You're signing him with the idea that he's going to match up. So I'm very curious to see how that goes. J.C. Jackson did that in New England. He's one of the best man corners in the game. He certainly can play zone as well. But I think that J.C. Jackson changes, in my mind, the way the Chargers secondary can play.
Dane, Greg mentioned that tandem in Vegas and Chandler Jones and Max Crosby. How about the tandem of Joey Bosa and now KHALIL Mack in L.A.?
Yeah, all of a sudden you look at that depth chart at pass rusher for the Chargers, and even the backups look intriguing. But it starts with those 2 guys, Bosa and Mack. Brandon Staley, had a relationship with KHALIL Mack. That he knows not only what he brings on the field, but the culture behind the scenes. That's a big part of this as well. So I think, the Chargers were aggressive. They went and got KHALIL Mack, bring him to the fold. And, they got better at every level of the defense. And that's huge for Brandon Staley, who, he was tossing and turning this offseason, figuring out, okay, how are we going to get better on my side of the ball?
Yeah, and I think, Chris, one other guy who's really worth mentioning is Bryce Callahan, because if you talk to the people in Denver, they'll tell you that he was an outstanding slot corner for them until he got hurt, and then that position kind of struggled a bit because he was not out there. And again, another under-the-radar signing because of the Mack signing and because of the Jackson signing, but I think Callahan is a really important piece as well.
It's a great point because the Chargers had some depth issues in the back end, and now you look at that secondary, it's a completely different operation entering 2022. All right, guys, next question. Most anticipated best divisional matchup. This AFC West is must-see TV. What's the most anticipated matchup as it relates to the Chargers?
I still think you have to look at the Chargers and the Chiefs, because the Chiefs are still, obviously they still have Patrick Mahomes. They're a really good team. They've had to make a lot of changes. Defensively, there's some changes made in losing Tyrann Mathieu. They signed a player that I think is a very good talent in Justin Reed to play on the back end. We'll see how all that works out, but he's a talented kid. So I still think you have to look at Chargers Chiefs. To me, not just because I'm doing this with you guys and it's in Charger land, but I think the Chargers, not only in the AFC West, but just in the league in general, are one of the most intriguing teams, because we know how good the quarterback is, and they've made a lot of ideally improvements on defense. And I think the drafting of Zion Johnson was a really good move. He'll step right in and start at one guard position. I think that the Chargers Chiefs is probably the most intriguing matchup to me.
Yeah, and fireworks early. Week 2, Arrowhead, Thursday night football. So you get right into it. And Dane, speaking of get right into it, how about Raiders Chargers Week 1 on September 11th at SoFi Stadium?
There's no wrong answer here for this question. Yeah. Broncos, Chiefs, but to your point, Chris, with the Raiders coming to LA to face the Chargers in the season opener, a rematch of last year's finale, one of the more exciting games in recent memory. The Chargers have had all offseason to digest what happened, and you know how badly they want to get back out there, get revenge. But also thinking about the matchups within the matchup. That, to me, that's what creates so much anticipation for this. You have KHALIL Mack making his Chargers debut, going up against the team that drafted him. Chandler Jones, who Greg mentioned, making his Raiders debut. He's going to go up against Rashawn Slater, who was so good last year as a rookie. What does he do in year 2? And then Davante Adams versus J.C. Jackson, Bryce Callahan as well. And then the quarterbacks, Derek Carr, Justin Herbert. It's only week 1 for this game, but you know what? It could really be a tone-setting type of game in a division where we know every inch is going to matter.
Yeah, and we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Monday Night Football, Broncos, Chargers. You mentioned Russell Wilson as being the most intriguing offseason addition. That one's going to be must-see TV as well. All right, final question, guys, and this one's fascinating because I could make the argument for really any combination in the AFC West when we get to week 18. Which teams come out of the West and make the postseason, and who wins the division, Greg?
Wow. There's so many unknowns, with this division, just because of moves that have been made. You never know how they're going to play out. I'd like to believe, because I've been around Brandon Staley. He's super impressive to be around. You just have to believe that this defense is going to be meaningfully better, not only tactically, now that he's been there a year, but also with the additions that they've made. I love their offense. I love Josh Palmer, who's in his second year, and I think he'll get meaningful snaps this year. I'm very curious about Gerald Everett, who actually has a lot of ability as a receiver. I think there's ways to use him, not as a volume target necessarily, but as a factor. I think the Chargers have a very legitimate chance to win this division this year.
Yeah, Kansas City, they've won, 6 straight AFC West titles? And so, until a team knocks them off the mountain, I think they have to, still be the favorite to win a division. No more Tyreek Hill, but as long as the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback, Andy Reid at head coach, they're going to be one of the best teams in the NFL and a strong contender for the Super Bowl. So, but with that said, I still expect the Chargers and Broncos to be right there with the Chiefs at the top of the division. I think there's a good chance we see 3 AFC West teams reach double-digit wins and make the postseason. So Chargers fans might not like my original answer about who wins the division, but I think the Chargers make the playoffs, and you can bet teams are not going to want to see Justin Herbert in the playoffs.
Mid-July as we take this, gentlemen. I cannot wait for the 2022 NFL season. Appreciate all the insight. This has been CrossFire.
If you want to see more content like this, check out the link right here.